What's up, SE Nation? Ramsey here. A couple of weeks ago, I posted on LinkedIn one of Kyle MacArthur's comments on my YouTube video that I've done in the past. It sounds complicated. It's not. It's YouTube video, comment. I copied that comment, pasted it on LinkedIn, and we got some feedback. The comment was, there's not one way to be a sales engineer until there's one way to be a customer. And it's a great comment, which is why I copied it. Tony agreed with that comment. And he mentioned that because of that, he advises his new SEs to mirror their customers in order to build rapport. I disagreed with that, and we jumped on a call to actually discuss. I started off by the simple question of, what do you mean by mirroring?
But as far as mirroring goes, no, I look at a lot of it from energy. I look back to times where I engaged with customers. If you're dealing, think about regionally, right? If you deal with a New Yorker, fast talker, wants answers quick, how you want to engage with them is in a similar format, because people naturally default to like people that are like them. And similar, like if you're in Georgia and they're a little more slowed down and a little more laid back, then your communication style should mirror that. So I feel like between energy and communication style, those are the two things that what I meant in my post as far as defaulting to coaching, to make sure that they are not overwhelming the customer by being too aggressive or too laid back.
It's good I'm clarifying this, because sometimes when we give advice, especially for new SEs who are joining, mirroring could be like, oh, you're crossing your hands, then I cross my hands. You order. And I've had a salesperson who orders exactly the same food that the customer orders no matter what.
Oh, wow.
And I've had situations where the salesperson orders first, the customer orders second, the salesperson changes his order to match whatever the customer is. So that's what I want to make sure that there are subtle ways of mirroring, and I've seen people try to mirror me and bug the life out of me, just because I'm aware of what's happening.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts around that so far? Like, how do you make sure that you're mirroring someone without insulting them or without making it too obvious?
You're right, and I think there's a bit of science behind it, right? So if you think about it's neuro-linguistic programming, which is the psychology term that is about building rapport and connecting with people. But it is very challenging, because you don't want to come across exactly like you mentioned, of like duplicating what they're doing. So you move your hand one way, they move their hand that same way, right? Like that's not
on camera. We can't even do it. Which way are you moving?
Right, because we're opposite.
That way.
There you go. But that's I think the big challenge is to how do you find the balance of repeating words and phrases that are important to them, keying in on the things that they're referencing through active listening, and then using that information in your presentation and catering what you're going to say in the format of what they've deemed to be important already. So, I think when you're going too far down that line and just verbatim repeating things that they're doing, the ordering of food is quite interesting too. But I think you're crossing the line at that point. You don't want to come across as too aggressive or too passive. It's finding that balance. And like most things that in the SE world, we're not going to find out our own balance until we get in there and do some and have those engagements and have ones that might go sideways.
Now that we've established what Tony meant by mirroring, and that it could go very wrong if someone hasn't practiced it or hasn't mastered it, he asked me how I would coach people to do mirroring. My short answer was that I don't. It's not one of the things that I focus on. Here's why, and what I focus on instead. I find that people tend to mirror anyways without thinking about it. If you're being energetic, you're giving me energy somehow, and I'm being energetic. If you're being slow, I'm being slow. Now there are other extremes where, customer is really laid back and the SEs all over the place. Salespeople are all over the place. I can see that, but generally, that's not something I focus on early on. I just focus on asking the right questions, and I don't bring a lot of energy when I ask the right questions. I just ask a question and shut up and sit back. So I focus more on the listening part than the mirroring part. Now we start talking about Chris Voss, the author of Never Split the Difference. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator and one of the people who talks about mirroring quite a bit. One of the tactics of mirroring is repeating the last 3 words of someone's statement in order to invite them to keep talking about it some more. I tried that. So let's see how that went.
Focus on what the customer's saying so that they feel like they're heard. Do you take things that customer then references while they're speaking and answering your questions, and then leverage that in your follow-up, in your conversation to position a solution?
Leveraging that in my follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
I just tried to do that right now, so it didn't work.
I just didn't
see
expand
what
on
I mean?
for sure. But I mean, that, if it's a particular, if it's you're asking the right questions to get them to uncover what's important to them,
So
right?
I agree. Like there are some things that they say, and I repeat them not mainly because it's their terminology and that's what they understand, not because I'm trying to mirror what they're saying. Because I sometimes repeat it just to understand that am I understanding the words that you're using correctly. So
In the right context.
Yeah, some people can mirror. Like I just tried to do it. I mean, if you've read the book Never Split the Difference, probably, or some other negotiation book.
Yep.
Chris Voss talks about repeating the last few words or paraphrasing the last few words, and that's never worked for me. It's actually, I've tried it multiple times, and the reaction is kind of like yours, like, yeah, what? Yeah, maybe I'm doing it wrong, right?
Well, and so Voss did a masterclass on that too, and I went through and listened to the whole thing. I challenged my team to come up with the same thing, and I think that his whole point was like, how far do you like allow that pause to happen? So if that last statement was leverage it in your conversation, you kind of ask it in a question like format to get them to expand, and they don't. I can see where that's a challenge because it's uncomfortable, and if they don't quite understand it, how do you contextualize that question?
Yeah.
So to make sure I'm understanding you right, when you say whatever the statement is,
yeah, no,
what do you mean?
Yeah, so from what I've seen, like his negotiation skills tend to be a little bit more adversary, right? Like he's working with the hostage, or negotiating a big deal. As sales engineers, we're not doing the negotiation mainly. We're just trying to get information. So for me, I always find the best way to get information is to ask and not have to worry about playing those like neurolinguistic. I'm not an expert in it. I don't even know what. Well, I guess I do know what they stand for, but I'm not an expert, and I don't feel like I need to be an expert. If I need more information, I ask information. If they don't want to tell me, I explain to them why I need this information. Like I'm not trying to play around with you. I need this I need to know your budget, for example, so that I can offer a solution that is close to your budget.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. So I personally try to stay away from it. Doesn't mean that it won't work for anybody else. It probably would. Now we want to circle back and talk about mirroring someone's energy.
Like when you mentioned that kind of natural response to someone who's high energy, you kind of just naturally gravitate to that communication style. It's kind of de facto mirroring. So might not coach on it or train on it, but I think that's where I leaned on it because I find myself doing the same thing. If you get in a room or in a conversation with someone that is engaging and is, bringing out that energy, then you're just as excited to get in that part of the conversation and respond in kind. And I think just the natural tendency of communication is people gravitate towards what they're most comfortable with. So if you find someone who speaks to you in a way that you naturally speak and you can relate to, it's that rapport building that I think to the original point of getting the right questions there's got to be some rapport and trust in that conversation to begin with.
The question is, what do you do if you're talking to someone who doesn't have the same cadence as you or has the opposite cadence of you? How do you build rapport then without doing that, if that's something that you find difficult?
Right. Well, and that's the fun piece too, right? Because it's not always the same tactics going to work for everyone. You're going to have the knowledge in the product that's going to be more impactful for some people because they're more analytical than they are emotional. And I think it's understanding that customer and partnering with the sales reps that's going to be able to provide you some of that information ahead of time so that going into the conversation, these are the things I'm going to key in on.
And finally, we get into some advanced tactics of rapport building. We all think about like we should be perfect all the time.
Right.
But sometimes it's the imperfections. And your colleague is perfect in that imperfection where we can use it to gauge how we can interact. And we don't have to like mirror or anything like that, but at least ask that question. Like I've had typos on purpose in my presentations so I can point them out in my presentation and make a joke about it, which is
See how
weird.
they respond.
But yeah, like it starts something up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not advice I'd give everybody. I advise them to be perfect, but it's worked for me.
Well, and it's the same thing. I'm like, don't everybody have a picture of the dog on their desktop and share that. That's not your best tactic. But it's the idea of how do you find ways to then connect and build that rapport. If it's a combination of things, if it's a single way to kick off a meeting, if it's that you pick up on the cues.
As a summary, mirroring is a great tool to build rapport. But I think both Tony and I agree that if someone wants to build rapport with a customer, they can start with the basics. Just be kind, be nice, answer the questions and solve the problems, be a trusted person, don't lie. And these are easy things to do. If you are a nice person, kind person, and you don't lie, you should be able to do that fairly easily. Then you can advance to some more advanced techniques, or even basic mirroring, such as mirroring the energy of the people in the room. That might come comfortably, that might not. But as we do progress and we learn and we practice doing that, it will get more comfortable, hopefully. So we can keep advancing and keep learning new techniques to build rapport. And in the end, we're going to have to find our four-legged friend technique that Tony mentioned his colleague does. We're going to have to find what we can have, something that's imperfect that can start a conversation and build rapport. So in the end, find your four-legged friend and let's build some rapport. That's it for today. Thank you guys for listening. If you're looking for some coaching, such as active listening that we discussed, check out the SE Hotline, and I will see you next time. Peace.